Good evening, friends, and welcome my panelists for this panel discussion post-budget to pick your brains on the various asset classes. I'll start first with Gitambar, as he's going to talk about an asset class which is by far been one of the best performing asset classes over the last few years, the real estate sector. Gitambar, last 5-7 years have been a phenomenal run, for the real estate sector. I think from very little investments that one would focus on in real estate maybe 7-8 years back, I guess today, whether it is a wealth firm, whether it is an HNI, almost everybody has huge, investments and exposure to this sector, and needless to say, it has delivered, fabulous returns. There were obviously a lot of constraints in terms of supply all over the country. It's not necessarily been the best time for volumes as much as it has been for prices. In your view, with the change in the government and their own ambition of, housing for all, maybe focusing more on volumes rather than prices, how do you see this whole sector playing out, over the next few years' time?
See, the thing is that the good news is that there is a huge shortfall. There's a supply constraint, or there's no supply coming into the market. The numbers which the FM said at the beginning of his budget was 2 crore houses in urban areas, I would say metros, and about 4 crores in what he calls rural is not exactly rural. It is tier 3 and tier 4 and even tier 2 towns. So the challenge for the government would be to actually put up these houses. And sadly, it was, the vehicle to do this was not at all addressed in the budget. The intention was there. They recognized the fact that this is the number that needs to come up. But how are they going to do it? Is it that the public sector is going to do it? Is it the private sector that's going to do it? If the private sector is going to do it, how are they going to actually promote people to go into these towns where 4 crore houses are required? You see, the metros, somehow or the other, become a very attractive destination for every developer. But to go down to a tier 2 or tier 3 town, there needs to be some fiscal incentive from the government to the private developer, to the private sector, because the bottom lines are very thin over there. It's a very thin margin game over there. So our, presentation to the government pre-budget had been that they should give some sort of an income tax incentive to the private sector to actually unleash supply, because all of us know that these houses are required. Maybe in these cities, all of us have 1 or 2 properties because we keep investing in them. But the fact of the matter is that in the rest of the country, in smaller towns, there is no supply of good housing. So we are very, very unclear about this. And another thing was, there's certain low-hanging fruit that we had asked for, certain amendments in the Income Tax Act, which actually affect our consumers, like a Section 43CA of the Income Tax Act, which talks about your ready reckoner rates and the sale values. So these issues were not at all addressed. So we are, as an industry, we were a little disappointed, because we had expected some real measures to actually create this supply of 6 crore houses, which the FM had talked about.
Right. So, yeah, coming back to my question, so what is your outlook for real estate prices, going forward? Last 1 year has not been as exciting as the preceding 5 years.
Yeah, because actually what has happened is that, before this new government came in, there was a general depression in the mood of everybody. What is the future, and God knows what the elections will throw up, what kind of a result. So even the people who wanted to buy a property were not buying it, so there was no transaction, so therefore there was no increase in the prices. Even in metros, let's say in Mumbai, or maybe in the NCR, or maybe in other metros like Bangalore and Calcutta. So there was no aggressive transaction happening. So when this government came in, unfortunately for the real estate sector, the stock market started doing very well. So whoever wanted to invest in real estate said, let me first invest in the stock market and make this great return, which Manish just talked about. And, all the money went there, and we saw the Sensex going up. But as an individual, I have always stressed the fact that real estate is the best asset class that one can invest in, because you actually see your asset. It's not just paper. Conventionally as Indians, we like to see that makan where we can actually invest our money and see it grow. And I am very, very certain that the money will start coming back into real estate, slowly but surely. I think in the next quarter, we'll see some transactions, picking up. In metros, the fact of the matter is there's no more land, तो जितनी supply है उतनी है, ज़्यादा आएगी नहीं तो भाव बढ़ेगा ही बढ़ेगा. छोटे शहरों में it's not so attractive an investment for the investor, but yes, there will be a robust market over there. There will be a lot of transaction, high volume transactions, if there's good quality housing coming up there. But for your investor sitting here, I would say this is the best time to buy, because as we go along, I don't say that the prices will go up exponentially, but there will be some sort of an escalation in prices because input costs have gone up big time. So there will be an increase, there will be appreciation, and I always recommend real estate as the best investment for us Indians as an asset class.
Of course. So Gitambar thinks real estate is the best asset class.
Rightly
that
so.
Prices will go up from here, and that it was unfortunate that last 1 year equities did well. Navneet, it is unfortunate equities did well last 1 year. Will they continue to bother the real estate sector next few years?
So I don't think that the money that came into the equity market, that was the reason for real estate not to perform. That money got diverted. Not really, because the amount of savings that we have in our country and the percentage that has come to the equity market is still minuscule. It's very, very small, and we have a very long way to go. And I have a firm view that I think the percentages over a period of time are going to go only higher and higher. So our equity ownership in India today is lower than what it was 25 years back. 25 years back, before brokers like Motilal Oswal were there, online trading was there, dematerialization was there, SEBI was there, NSE was there. None of these things were there, and we had more equity in our portfolio than what we have today. So we have a very long way to go. And similarly, from global investors, I think we are the last game in town. Looking at the rest of the world, when German bond yields are like in negative territory, I think India really offers a very exciting opportunity wherever you are sitting in the world. So obviously, I think the money flow to Indian equities would be far greater. I mean, Manish has spoken about all the measures that have been taken in the budget, so I won't take much time in terms of the overall macro outlook. Everybody is aware. I'll just make one point that in your conference, I mean, talking of the institutional conference that you do, one of the best conference, and there are other brokers who do. So typically what we do a day or 2 or 3 here in Bombay, and you meet corporates, and then you do a macro tour in Delhi, then you meet some of the government officials, some of the ministers. And every year that I've seen over the last 20 years, the experience is that in Bombay you meet SDFC Bank, you meet Dilip Sanghvi, you meet TCS and all that, and you get very excited about India. And you go to Delhi and meet some of the ministers and bureaucrats, and you think, yaar, desh ka kuch nahi ho sakta hai. And now I'm seeing a very different situation. When you meet corporates here in Bombay in these conferences, maybe several of them are still sounding very gloomy. But when you go to Delhi and meet ministers and bureaucrats, it's a different country altogether. Maybe I think some of those guys are not keeping pace with what's going to happen in this country for the next several years. And that's where the opportunity would be. I think those promoters, those businessmen who really believe that there is a paradigm shift which is happening in this country, we could be in a completely different league in a couple of years' time. From 2 trillion, we are going to get to 4 and then $8 trillion, and the size of opportunity is just too big. I think there the sheer opportunity of making money, the power of compounding would be in your favor. So I would strongly argue, not that you have 4 colors so on every table, so we have to talk about the 4 different asset classes and everybody talks about it. But I genuinely believe, I think equities over the next several years. Since on a lighter note, Naveen sent me a note about the, his take on the 50th anniversary letter of Berkshire Hathaway. And then one of my analysts sent me a sheet that in last 15 years, Sensex has outperformed Berkshire Hathaway. So just the Sensex has outperformed Warren Buffett. I don't see any reason in next 15 years why Indian equities won't outperform. And if you can do that sheer power of compounding for 30, 40 years, I think it's a mind-blowing number.
Yeah, absolutely. So clearly the long term looks very exciting. Navneet, as you just articulated, the power of compounding should play out. The Warren Buffett letter obviously talks about equity asset class versus all other asset classes, and he's put out his verdict there quite clearly, loud and clear. But there have been headwinds in the recent past, right? We've seen 6 months of earnings downgrade. The Indian market corporate earnings have got downgraded by 10%. Beginning of the year, with the Modi mandate, brokers were gunning for a 15 to 20% earnings growth. We're now looking at a 5% earnings growth in FY 15. And the markets have obviously scaled up to new highs. You know, if we just break down the 2014 market performance, Indian stock markets delivered 30% return. Corporate earnings grew 5 and re-rating was 25. We are at 21 times trailing earnings now, maybe 22 times. In the near term, do you think the market performance could be different from, you know, your long-term outlook of, you know, a big bull market ahead?
So it has always been like that because markets are forward-looking while the earnings will take time to catch up. We also had the inventory losses. This massive fall in commodity prices got reflected in several companies. Obviously, I mean, there is a large part of the corporate India which is still struggling with bloated balance sheet. The interest cost is still high. But now with execution picking up and probably with the high GDP growth, you'll have the top line growing at probably more reasonable double-digit rate. And the expansion in the margins could be greater because you look at all factor of cost of production. You look at rentals, you look at wages, you look at commodity prices and interest costs, which are all falling together. And then you'll have a bigger effect on the bottom line over a period of time, but of course earnings are likely to catch up. On the very near term, I'm not giving a trading view, but I think, as you rightly said, that because the valuations have run up, I think markets are likely to consolidate here. Why they wouldn't fall? So I'm not very hopeful about the March quarter earnings as well. Why they wouldn't fall? I think everywhere I travel in this country, people have made up their mind. They want to increase the allocation to equities. It's just that a lot of people are still stuck with a lot of real estate. So I think that liquidity has to improve in the real estate. And just let me complete. I'm saying that because people have more exposure to real estate, and I think they have much lower exposure to equity, it's a more asset allocation. So I think over a period of time, as the money flow from India and also the globally, as long as ECB, I mean all the central banks keep printing money, the required rate of return, the asking rate of return for those investors is much lower in India, really looks very promising on a relative basis. So I think the money flow will not allow the market to really go down much. You won't get an opportunity if you think that you will get a 10-15% correction because the earnings are not good. I'm not very hopeful of that, but the upside looks limited in the very near term. But always remember, in equities it's very difficult. If anybody takes a call, and I've seen it several times, you try to do that timing that okay, next 1 year bonds may deliver 10 or 12, so it's better to invest in bonds. Maybe equity underperforms, but you don't get returns in that linear fashion in equity. Most of the returns that you are going to get in 7 or 8 years may get front loaded in 3 years. How do you know? So I think it's that timing that market could be really challenging. So I would argue that, I mean, stay with your asset allocation. So I'm sure Suresh would throw a better light, but also think bonds will also do very well. But I think equity allocation is very low. People should get that right.
थोड़ा सा मैं अपने आप को डिफेंड कर लूँ. We have the time.
Of course.
नहीं, मैं आपसे एक सवाल पूछता हूँ बड़ा. It's a very basic question which, as a common man, I want to ask you. Where was the Sensex a year ago? Where is it now? Earnings you said are corporates की 5% है. Sensex is forward looking, so 30% returns. Is this not a bubble? I mean, tomorrow if there's one bad news about taxation or retrospective taxation, the FIRs exit like that. Real estate is an asset which is much safer. It grows steadily, and you've bought a house in Mumbai. It will keep growing because there's no more houses coming up. So I will defend, real estate. You must balance your investment. Real estate में investment होनी ही चाहिए, क्योंकि ऐसे वक्त में जब मार्केट टूट जाए आपको यही एक सहारा मिलता है. आपको मैं बहुत देसी बात बता रहा हूँ. So you please invest in equities, invest in debt, but you must balance your investment, and you must have an investment in real estate. Don't liquidate it and go to equities because it's so fragile.
That's why I said, because people are too imbalanced. I think there is much more real estate than equities in India. So they correct that balance.
I don't think so. You see the total amount of money in real estate and total amount of money in equities. The answer is there.
Yeah, so I think this discussion can go on all the evening. Yeah. I think we'll bring in some other asset classes and other viewpoints here. So we'll move on to Suyash. Suyash, as Navneet just pointed out, last 12 months have been good, for the bond markets, for the debt investors as well, not just for the equity investors. We've had all the rates coming down, wholesale rates, 10-year GSEC yields. Now we have even the policy rates down 50 basis points. What is your outlook for various interest rates, not just policy rate, not just 10-year government paper, not just wholesale rates, but a broad spectrum of rates. How do you see, and what are the various things to look out for when you, try to predict, where do you see the bond markets and the rates going forward?
Right. So, one of the first things to appreciate about fixed income for the last year or so, and that's a point we've been making repeatedly, is that this discussion how to beat inflation is one of the past now. I mean, you can simply beat inflation today by investing in a 10-year government bond, and that's the miracle of, the so-called back of structural inflation having been broken in this country, so that for the first time, the Reserve Bank of India has the luxury to target a 2% positive real rate over CPI inflation. So, till last year or the year before that, advisors and asset allocators used to spend a lot of time thinking about how to beat inflation via gold or real estate or equities. Simply by investing in a 10-year sovereign bond today, you can beat inflation. The other thing about fixed income today, and that also is a function of the credibility that India has built both on macro policy as well as the tailwind we have gotten from lower commodity prices, is that one should not look forward to too much volatility. So a debate that one hears lately is rates are already down by 125 basis point since 9% on 10-year last year, and how much more they can go, so should we try and book? Our simple point is, you don't know how much more this has to run. So we would treat this market as a kind of an option to see if all the structural measures that are being talked about and, if they get implemented, then maybe we are actually breaking in terms of rates to a structurally new level. At the same time, volatility is so low that it affords you to participate, and with a reasonable possibility that you will be able to exit without very large impact cost whenever you want to exit. So in a market like this, we would not be based on level targets or policy rate targets. Having said that, the point you asked about how we analyze, RBI policy and other rates. See, the RBI policy has a very, simple two-leg approach right now. One is their CPI inflation forecast, and two, what kind of a real rate target they want to set over CPI. Now, our own analysis of CPI suggests that the year ahead will see an average CPI very close to 5%, and we are quite happy that the Government of India seems to agree in the budget pronouncement this year. The RBI has said in the initial part of this cycle, they will target somewhere around 1.5 to 2% real positive rate. So if you combine the two, it is quite likely that the repo rate, which is even today at 7.5, at least moves to 7% in the 12 months ahead. Now, the other aspect of interest rates, and this is exactly the mirror opposite of what was happening in 2013 when we got that large shock on interest rates, is that fundamentally interest rates is where demand and supply of money intersects. So if you have a system or an economy which is fundamentally in disequilibrium on demand versus supply of money, then there is a very low case for interest rates going lower. So if you take 2013 in context, and many investors have been very scared with duration assets since 2013, in 2013, there was a very severe disequilibrium between demand and supply of money. The two practical indicators you can go by to measure this disequilibrium is, one is the current account. So the current account deficit is basically the difference between your investment and savings. And the other is the credit to deposit ratio in the banking system. So you used to see 11% rates on one-year bank CDs simultaneously when policy rates were at 7/4. So clearly the RBI was mispricing where the cost of money should have been. If you look at the scenario today, it's exactly turned on its head. The savings investment disequilibrium is closing fast. We are looking forward to a current account deficit which is lower than 1%. Banking system, if anything, is struggling with excess cash and where to deploy. And all these measures like Jan Dhan Yojana, etc., which will populate 12 crore accounts potentially with financial savings over a period of time, will further serve to close this imbalance. So this is a market where, if this argument gets forward in a logical fashion, you can actually look forward to a long period of lower interest rates. The one point that we will watch out for closely is, as the RBI gets more ambitious with its inflation targets, the government has to support with structural food reforms, because at some juncture, we can't rely on 3% wage growth forever. There is a welfare effect to that. So as the government puts forward, for instance, the restructuring of the Food Corporation of India, which collapses volatility in food prices, that is when the case for interest rates gets further strengthened.
So, if you were to break down your view into the next 1 year and let's say 3 years, we saw rates, the 10-year paper collapsing to, sub 5% at one point in time in the last decadal history. So longer term, how low do you see, rates going? You said, this is an option as you see it. Is that option high likelihood, low likelihood, or completely unlikely? And let's say from a 12-month point of view, what should investors expect? Should they buy duration, accrual?
So, from a 12-month perspective, like I said, we have substantial visibility that the repo rate falls at least to 7, and therefore there is still money to be made on the table. With a 3-year view, the simplest way to visualize is like this. The RBI has set forward an inflation target mechanism, and there is a MOU that has been signed with the Government of India, which states that in the next 2 to 2.5 years, they will aim to bring CPI inflation down to 4%, which is the midpoint of the 4 plus minus 2 target. Now today your 10-year nominal bond yield is at 770. If you visualize 4% inflation in context of a 770 bond yield, it is ridiculously at a high level. So if we can transition to this journey to 4% inflation, yes, there is a case for lower interest rates, and maybe even substantially lower interest rates, but that's at this juncture, whether repo rate falls below 7 will be a function of the institutional mechanisms Government of India can put to curtail food price volatility chiefly. And obviously, what else can be done to improve the savings investment disequilibrium. The other point I'll make is, our return expectations from fixed income, which is essentially an income earning asset and not a wealth creating asset like equity or real estate, has been conditioned with through years of 10% inflation. Now, if I were to tell you that the average inflation you are going to experience in the next 5 years is 5%, and this is not theoretical because the cost of food and other items that you will buy will be 5%, even a 7% return from a bond fund will look quite attractive to you. It's because your conditioning today is, you are coming from a double-digit inflation era, you want double-digit return to beat inflation. And this conditioning will take time to change, and which is precisely the point behind killing inflation. That, savers settle for lower nominal interest rates and therefore give a boost to economy, and not the Government of India pressurizing the RBI to cut rates. From a fund selection perspective, given the view we have, we would prefer allocations into duration fund, but with a large caveat that one has to have appetite for at least minor volatility. Accrual is also a good asset, but the only point to be kept here is one has to start hedging reinvestment risks if one has not already started to do it. So in the last 4 to 5 years, fixed maturity plans or short-term funds did well for you because you used to reprice at a higher rate than where you invested. In the years forward and starting this year, you will most likely reinvest at a lower rate than where you invested first, and therefore the utility for plugging reinvestment risks.
Right. Okay, great. Gautam, to draw you into the discussion, this budget saw the finance minister articulating his long-term, tax rate guidance of 25% from 30% right now. But the effective tax rate is a lot lower at 23.5%. So while the marginal rate of taxation will fall, the effective tax rate may not fall because exemptions will be taken out. And they put out a lot of data in the budget papers about sectors with 5 to 10% tax rate and sectors with 30% tax rate. How will this whole thing play out in your view? I mean, what are the kind of big ticket exemptions that are going out of the way? Which are the sectors which could be most prone to, ETR, effective tax rate increase? Because those at 30 are unlikely to go up.
Yeah, good question. But before I get down to answer that, I was listening very keenly to the
Real
healthy
estate
debate.
versus equity debate.
Real estate versus equity, and then
home loan business, SBI ka home loan business bhi to hai. Somebody
just
has to speak for them.
just wanted to remind that you can keep having whatever debate you want, but the most important piece in this is the tax.
Yeah.
So let's not forget the importance of that. I think this budget, we are a country of very high expectations, so whether it's cricket or the budget, there is a lot of passion into the way this goes. On specifically how this is going to play out over the next 4 years, there are a few sectors which tend to enjoy more of these tax breaks. So for example, you will have pharma units which have been set up in, say Himachal Pradesh, and who being having the tax holidays, right? Or you have the IT parks, right? Players over there who are enjoying the tax holidays in those units. Now, while the finance minister has not really come out clearly and said as to which of these exemptions he wants to take off. He could have in mind just taking off or lowering depreciation rates, for example, wherever you are entitled to accelerated depreciations, or this R&D expenditure where you get a weighted deduction for those. So he's not really categorically said where he's going to come from. My sense is he may not hit infra, just given the focus of the whole government on infra. But other than that, I'm not seeing any sector which is going to be protected as such, right?
Right.
So it's open right now. 4 years is a pretty long period. I think the only positive around that is probably for the first time you've seen a finance minister come and give some sense of assurance that he's not going to change the rates.
Yeah.
Right? And if at all rates are going to change, it's from 30 to 25.
Right.
Right. So that's, I thought, the good part of this budget. No unpleasant surprises.
Yeah.
And I've been watching budgets right since, Mr. Nani Palkewala's days. So earlier the expectations always used to be, if I may say, entitlement.
Yeah.
Give me holidays, reduce rates, increase the taxable thresholds, all of that. But if you see the real noise over the last 2-3 years in this budget from industry, from high net worth individuals, it's more about enablement. Let me carry on my business in peace.
Yeah.
Don't trouble me.
Yeah.
Get the dispute sorted out, right? So it's been more on that. So the asks have become more simple, more to do with fairness, equity, justice, rather than saying, ye dil mange more, in the sense of actually giving me more money in my pocket.
Right.
So that's the shift that I've seen.
And there is always some devil in the detail relating to taxation. Was there any such, devil in the detail this time, or fine
I think a
print?
very good question. If I leave the non-tax piece aside and just focus on tax, I'd like to put a differentiation of intent versus content.
Okay.
On intent, I'll probably rate the budget as 9 on 10. So we've been in talks with folks in the North Block over the last 12 months, 9 months, on various aspects. And I must give them credit that almost on every single major ask, they've come back and stated their intent, which is very positive. We were checking on GAR, they said yes, we're pushing it back. Wanted clarity on Vodafone, they've come out with that. Asset Management Committee wanted, safe harbor rules.
Yeah.
It's never been heard of in India. They've come and introduced that.
Yeah.
Domestic AIFs, a lot of you all are investing through that, right? Wanted pass-throughs, they've come back with that. Very high on intent. If you get down into content, I think somewhere the guy who's writing the code is, at a different level from the person who said, go ahead and do it. Right? So a lot of this stuff has been translated into writing which is not going to make any change. Right? REITs and AIFs, unlikely to really take off, especially not for domestic investors. Right? A big surprise which is going to impact corporates in a big way is this whole place of effective management rules. Right? So you look at all the large groups who've gone outbound.
Yep.
Right? A lot of overseas holding company structures for these are now likely to get taxed in the net in India, unless these guys climb down and make clarifications and relax the rules a bit. Right? So this is a big disconnect in the fine print versus this. But you ask anybody who went to Parliament or saw Mr. Jaitley's speech, right? A lawyer, true to his profession, he was very articulate in the way the messages came out. But spending the weekend reading the budget, I think Monday mornings,
Very different.
so I get into budget meetings, right, and everybody is gung-ho. But by the time I'm through, I don't think I'm a very nice man.
Okay. So there was a lot of devil in the detail then.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Gitambar, coming back to you, you made a very strong, compelling case that, real estate is core to any portfolio. Actually, if you think very commonsensically, this area where we are in is Prabhadevi. And a decade back, less than a decade back, you could buy, ready to move in houses here at 5,000 rupees a square foot. Now, obviously, you'll have to drive down 50 kilometers to, get that price towards North Mumbai. Today, the prices are nearly 10x of that. I can promise you, no matter what business you are in, excepting maybe law or something, incomes have not grown 10x. So affordability, as HDFC measures it, has come down. So that's, one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, you have 40,000, 50,000 rupees per square foot Prabha Devi. I'm just taking a micro market to illustrate a point. Ready to move in, grade A residential is available at, let's say, 40,000-50,000. And grade A office, ready to move in Peninsula Corporate Park, you can just buy an office today, 15, 16, 17,000. 3:1, 3.5:1. Is this all okay in your view?
See, it's because there's no new supply coming in here. You see, it's a very logical thing that's happening. There's no new supply coming up, so therefore there is an ambition. There are many people who would like to live over here at 40,000-50,000 rupees. Resi ki baat karte hain. There are many people who would like to have their offices over here in a building like this. So these transactions will keep happening. As incomes grow, there will be transactions at this level which will continue. But you yourself said, you see, the real estate investor must have some sort of a vision, or he must have some advisory who gives him that vision. Okay, आप इधर जाके invest कीजिए, यहाँ से 2 साल बाद आपको ऐसा रिटर्न मिलना चाहिए, या आप वहाँ जाके मकान लीजिए, वो एरिया खूब चलेगा क्योंकि वहाँ पे कल को काम आएगा, ऑफिसेज आएंगे. The sad part is there's no such advisory. Our broker community in the real estate space is so unorganized, is so unanswerable, that our investors cannot take them for their word. There may be a selected few, but there is no aggressive advisory in the real estate space. So it's a great opportunity for people like you to actually advise your investors that to have a balanced portfolio, you must have some real estate investments, and this is where you should go. Because in the next 2 to 3 years, this is where it will be.
So I'm going to pick your brain on this. So there are many things not to buy today in real estate. There are some which may be very attractive. If you were to make a recommendation to this house on, which region, what segment, in your view, maybe 2-3 examples, recommendations, what would you recommend to the house?
See, I would say any space which, I don't know, the Mumbai market really, and I was talking to people today, Thane, I believe, is also somewhere around 8,000 rupees a square foot in the Resi space. So if there are projects which are being sold at 6,000 rupees, and there are projects in Thane which are being sold at 17,000 rupees. Yeah. I would say, and not specific to Mumbai, you can go outside Mumbai also, and Nasik, Pune, anything which you are getting today at below 5,000 rupees, not in the CBD, but let's say within a radius of 7 kilometers in the CBD. और ऐसी जगहें हैं, पुणे में हैं, मैंने नासिक is another place where in Maharashtra to speak of. NCR में we have places like Noida and Noida Extension. So geographically you would know your areas better, but at this level, a Resi is a good buy. 5,000, between 4,000 and 5,000 rupees a square foot. And this will definitely appreciate, at least I would say year on year, you could easily expect a 20% appreciation, because Abadi dhire dhire bahar ja rahi hai, there's more urbanization happening. We are expecting 53 million people to come into urban areas in the next, by 2030. So there is an opportunity there. You'll have to be patient. Don't expect, to trade for 500 rupees a square foot. Those days are gone. You have to have a longer vision. At least I would say you should have a 3-year horizon. And then you should go in for these prices and buy wherever you can get closer. I mean, you have to make that judgment on your own, whether, the business will expand to that area or closer to that area. So you go to a good advisory, and these prices are good to buy into.
Okay, so 7-kilometer radius of the CBD, around 5,000 rupees.
Yeah,
take your
for
pick.
Resi, Mumbai doesn't fit into that bill.
Of course.
But of course, there's, India is a huge country. If you can buy shares of a company which is down south, I'm sure you can invest in property which is not in Mumbai.
Yeah. Navneet, turning to you, so what would be your investment strategy? You are, obviously positive longer-term equities. There's a huge amount of flows that can still come into equities. We've already seen mutual funds starting to get 5,000-6,000 crores of inflows on a monthly basis. So almost 50,000-60,000 crores annualized, which is unprecedented, at least in the history of mutual funds. With this kind of a potential flow, with margins at their bottom, interest costs at their peak, corporate earnings looking up to you, what should be the investment strategy? I mean, which sectors, what themes, what ideas should investors focus on in your view?
Several. I think the advantage in India is that we are not dependent on 1, 2 or 3 particular sectors or businesses or themes, but there is a variety of business to pick from. There is not audible. There is going to be tremendous. So I would say that the rules of the game are changing in India. I think the game itself is changing in India. So a lot of money that has been made by people by getting natural resources, which includes something like a spectrum or a coal or iron ore or whatever, at a cheaper price by managing the environment. I think that's or a government contract is going to be substantially different in next couple of years, where most of these things have to be bid in a very, very fair and transparent manner, which increases the competitive intensity. So obviously several businesses that have done well in last few years may not do very well in next couple of years. At the same time, I think the way the infrastructure will get built up in next couple of years is going to be dramatically different, and there are going to be large number of players who are going to benefit. So I think across the board, if I look at the railway budget, I'm very bullish on what the state governments are going to do and the central government as well. So I think in capital goods, in engineering, in construction, materials like cement, I think most of them are likely to do well, because I'm expecting a big reversal of investment cycle driven by the infrastructure build-up, not the private capex, which will be followed by in another couple of years. Even on the consumption side, so with the decline in rural wage, I mean the growth in rural wages or the less government spending, less MSP hike and all that may make some dent in the consumption in the near term, but structurally I think with the better aspiration levels, and if you believe that with these policies jobs will get created, this is a young country, people are going to spend, and as you move from $1,500 to $3,000 per capita, a lot of it goes into different kind of discretionary spending. So in next couple of months you will have a coffee chain coming with $1 billion IPO. You will have several of these theme parks, entertainment parks. You will have different kinds of businesses coming to the market. So I still believe that consumption, particularly niche consumption, has a long way to go. Tourism will take a big boost. I think several businesses will benefit from that. Despite the slowdown in the world, I think in terms of exports, I think there are a couple of industries which are really doing very well. So light engineering, chemicals, I think in auto ancillaries, India has a very long way to go. So our share of exports in the global export is very small. So despite an extremely challenging global environment, I think several companies will do very well and they'll become very big. I think the trick is to identify those companies and focus on, look at the valuations. The last, you would have heard it from these people several times, but I just look at the sustainable competitive advantage. So if you are spending 5 hours on looking at a company, 4 hours just spend on how sustainable, and then first of all the competitive advantage and how sustainable that is for next several years. And I repeat the first line that I mentioned, I think the rules of the game are not changing, the game itself is changing. So it's going to be a very different world, and I'm not talking about the different other things that are happening in the world for, I'll leave that at this moment.
Yeah. Okay, here we'll let Gitambar leave because he has a flight to take. Yeah, and we'll carry on with the panel discussion. Gitambar, thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and
Thank
gentlemen.
you.
Sorry I have to leave.
Thank you. Come, they're going to help you with that. Suyash, moving on to you. In the previous cycle, 2002 to 8, we saw the credit growth, for the system as a whole expanding to almost 25%, several banks growing their, advances at 30%. It was a whole different, era compared to what you are seeing now. How do you see, this whole side, the bank balance sheet, playing out? We've already seen a few rounds of SLR cuts. I'm sure with the fiscal deficit targets over the next 2-3 years, there's a lot more room to bring that down. But how do you see the whole credit expansion, the GSECs, some of these things playing out for the banking sector going forward?
Personally, I'm not very bullish on banks as an intermediation channel, at least for the next couple of years. And, if I just look at the way asset quality is still behaving without, too many signs of bottoming out, with very, very big ticket items coming under stress, with the higher provisioning requirements that kick in from the next quarter, the higher liquidity requirements under Basel III. And the very important fact that the government of India maybe has well thought out the strategy that they are not going to continue to pump good money after bad, and therefore they are restricting the direct amount of capital provisioning that they are going to do for banks, and instead trying to help them with better management and raising money from the market. So if I put all of this together, and I think there was a sense of this in this budget as well, where the government is only restricting the gross capital infusion to 8,000 crores, which is flat from last year. Instead, they are trying to cultivate their own balance sheet to, route money into infrastructure to some extent, as well as use other financing routes, including from domestic savers and offshore savers. Fortunately, we are in this happy position right now where there is a global glut of liquidity, and if you can channel it rightly, part of it at least can help with your infrastructure boom. So, to specifically answer your question on banks, I think despite RBI cutting SLR ratios, the gross holdings of government bonds should remain high at least for the next couple of years. I will not look for banks to dump their government holdings in order to create space for lending. Yes, there are certain sectors where, for instance, coinciding with their low-cost housing initiative, banks may step up lending to certain sectors. Retail credit may pick up. But for the next couple of years at least, I think the SLR holding levels will continue to be very close to where they are now as a percentage of their deposits.
And how worried are you about the state-owned banks, given their levels of capitalization, given their level of asset quality, given the banks, government's own, falling commitment to at least the weaker banks? Consolidation is an option to the banks, and so they control a bulk of the banking sector today. Could there be a big risk, from that side? Is the government not awake to the, potential risks, from that part of the financial sector, in your view?
No, I think they are, but like I said, a happy thing at least for me was the strategy seems to be relatively well thought out, that they can't afford to put too much money after this right now, because there are a lot of issues that they need to work through. It's going to be a very slow moving process. So one fear one could have had was they will be desperate to pump prime balance sheets, which they don't seem to be. So they are quite innovatively trying to use whatever delta spending they can, either through their own balance sheet or through devolution to states to increase infrastructure spending. They are tapping public savings, they are tapping offshore money, etc. From a fixed income perspective, given the state of where public sector banks are, we are not very bullish on these new innovative instruments like additional tier 1 bonds, etc. that are coming through. And at least personally, I would inject a word of caution with respect to such instruments. I don't really see a macro risk around it because push comes to shove, this will get managed. But there has been a view that the budget could turn out to be inflationary. I don't subscribe to that view purely for this reason, that if you look at the aggregate of credit multiplier and investment multiplier, the credit multiplier still doesn't seem to be kicking in the near future in a hurry for India. So the only option remaining for the government is to try and kickstart some central or state government investment multiplier.
Gautam, do you want to throw some light on taxation on AIFs, and how should one look at that? There's some confusion relating to that.
Yeah, so last July was when we had quite a few clients of ours who are out in the market raising money through the AIF, and this circular comes through. So literally things were put on hold. So the good news is that yes, for at least category 1 and category 2 AIFs, right? So which means AIFs who are investing primarily in unlisted category, the government has granted a pass-through. Now that really means you as an investor will have to reflect the income in your returns of income, and the AIF will be what they say disregarded for tax purposes. Okay. There are a couple of, again, devil, intent and content. There's a devil in the fine print. One, this pass-through is not available for category 3s. So the listed equity is not something on which they have thought it worth to give the pass-through, which was sad because the category 3 AIFs also include the long-only funds. And that's something the government should encourage, because it wants to raise, people to raise capital for the long.
Absolutely.
Whereas I think the government's mind, Cat 3 AIFs, was primarily only the hedge fund kind of variety that they were thinking about. So that's one. The second, this pass-through is only available where the income of the AIF is not regarded as business income.
Right.
Now I know a lot of investors, individual investors also, you keep coming across these case laws where tax authorities keep challenging what you're doing. Is it really long-term capital gains or is it business, right? So that discretionary power is still retained with the tax authority. So we're still in discussions. Let's see if we can get some more clarity and certainty on this. But like I said, at least they have come out and saying AIF 1 and 2 policy level, we want to give the pass-through. Sure. That's good. And just generally otherwise for, I think, high net worth individuals here in the country, things could have been a lot worse. Wealth tax has been abolished, right? So that's a big saving grace. We don't have estate duty here. right? Our rates of tax at 30% or with the surcharge and says 33%, we may consider them to be high. But if you compare it with the rates, let's say in the UK or US, right, we're not so worse off. In fact, you all would have heard that incident of the Facebook guy relocating to Singapore, right? And the prime reason was because US tax rates were too high, right? So yes, the challenge here more that we keep hearing from clients is about the administration of tax.
Right.
When I go and have a scrutiny done, there's somebody who's not acting in a reasonable manner on the opposite side.
And from a taxation point of view, do you think REITs are all set now to take off, or there are devils in detail there as well?
So the runway was built, right? I don't think the planes have been oiled as yet.
Okay.
So there's just going to be one or two specific fact patterns where the REITs may flow out, right? But as a thumb rule, I don't think REITs and InvITs, the way the tax structures have today been put, would really take off for now.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm now going to open the floor for question and answers from the audience.
We are open for Q&A now, so anybody who wants to ask a question can put their hands up, and we have mics, on the floor. Yeah, there. Vinay.
Yeah. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, there's a question there.
Yep.
Yeah.
My name is Ashok Narang. I am in real estate business since last 30 years.
Could you speak up? Yeah.
I would like to ask the forum, without real estate, whether equity market can go higher. You see, the paint industry, that depends on real estate. The housing finance companies, they depend on real estate. The cement sector, they depend on real estate. The steel sector, they depend on real estate. There are more than 160 industries that are connected to real estate industry, from which your equity market runs. According to me, if real estate is not there, equity market cannot have this type of valuation. So my question to the panelists are whether real estate is supportive to equity, or we are hand in glove together, the market can take it forward.
You want to talk about that?
So, real estate industry doing well, and you as an investor in a real estate buying a flat or plot or whatever, there are two very different things.
Yeah.
So in last 10 years has been a price story as far as real estate is concerned. So as you mentioned, 5,000 has become 50,000 a year. The next 10 years is a volume story where prices may not go up, but the volumes will go up substantially. So if the government has got an ambition, and I think they have a serious intention as well as I think the execution capability, in next 10 years, housing for all can be a very big thing. So industry will do well, may not necessarily that you as an investor, and also people don't take into account. So if you buy a house in Thane or wherever, the transaction cost, the liquidity, I mean in a stock you put my redemption and you get the NAV of that day. Here there is no NAV, and that's why the perceived better return, but I mean the actual volatility could be very high if you go to a broker and then take the price every day. So industry will become very big. I sincerely believe, I think if the fine print is okay, REITs will become a very big asset class. That would be a better way of investing and not maybe buying a flat. I mean, it's a simple theory that any asset class, I mean, if a company, the Sun Pharma is earning every day, the stock price is just a slave of the earning power. Here in a empty flat, you're looking for another buyer who will pay you a higher price tomorrow. These two are very, very different things.
According to me, REIT as of now is a non-starter because the taxation factor, the MAT is there, where 20% tax has to be paid. Then you have a 3-year lock-in in real estate, whereas equity you have got 12 months lock-in. Again, we have a stamp duty issue in REITs. So according to me, REIT as of now, it is a non-starter and it will not take off. That is what my view is.
I think it's only a matter of time, may not be this year. But a real estate industry cannot really grow unless we really make a REIT, MBS, some of these things. These are like, I mean, the founding is to, I mean, you need them in place if you have the ambition for the housing for all.
So for housing for all, real estate industry leads land, and land is such a big thing which it's not getting cleared at the center. And if we are talking for affordable housing and 100 smart cities to come in, I think so it is a dream according to me. Affordable word is not there. It's only the housing. So how that will take off, it's a very big question. To make one smart city of 100 acres, it's very difficult to get into it. So according to me, this is a long drawn affair. It can be a daydream unless some very big action is taken by the center.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's what Gautam was saying, intent versus content. I think that not just applies to taxation, but some of these big bang reforms as well. You're absolutely right. Turning on to the next question.
Wanted two questions. One was a clarification that I heard somewhere that the PPF has been increased to 1.5 lakhs in this budget. Just wanted a clarification on that. And with the relaunch of the tax-free bonds, is that a good segment to get into again with the interest rate the way they appear to be going down? What's your take on that?
So it's not the increase of the PPF to 1.5. So last year, the limit under 80C as we know it, along with all the other sections, the limit was 1.5 lakhs. What they have increased is a contribution to the national pension scheme, right? They have now given you the ability to contribute an additional 50,000. So you get 1.5 lakhs under the general basket, which also includes NPS. But over and above that, you get an additional 50,000 for the NPS itself. That's the change which has been made. On the tax-free bonds, yes, he did announce the intent to roll out tax-free bonds on the infra side. So it'll all depend on, what are the interest rates that, the post-tax interest rates that are being offered. And I guess investors would then, compare that with the other options available.
Don't you think the agriculture sector is the one sector that has been somewhat neglected, considering the fact that it's got importance in terms of the job creations as well as in demand creation? The amount allocated, don't you think it is rather low, and it should have been more in terms of improving the productivity and providing credit to the growers and assuring a stable price, etc.?
Which sector are you referring to? Which agriculture sector? Do you think agriculture is kind of ignored?
So the point that Suyash made, actually, in this all talk about the budget, one thing that has not got adequate attention apart from the people who are in the bond market is this historic agreement between the Reserve Bank of India and the Government of India that the RBI is mandated to keep CPI at 4% plus minus 2%. And that means that over the next several years, the government has to, I mean not the government, but I think government has to facilitate tremendous amount of investment into agriculture to improve the productivity and get the excess labor out. So obviously there is going to be huge opportunity. Agri-chemical stocks have done tremendously well. In my initial, when I talked about the exports, I also talked about the chemicals that includes agri-chemicals, both for the domestic as well as the international use, and several companies are doing very well. I mean, we have a lot of stocks in our portfolio. So I think the whole agronomy, as we call, I think has a lot of potential.
Hello.
There's a question.
I'm Mahendra Sundesha.
Hi.
Historically, the equity market has the general public has burned their fingers. System at, very like 91, 2000, 2008. Again, there is a so high, last 1 year, this up. Somehow you do feel that this has a safe investment for another 5-10 years too, and there is no such again going to happen. I mean, what is the safeguards? Like yesterday that news of NACL. I mean, this keeps happening, and there is always a big doubt in the. That's why I think still the general public investment has not been to the extent what maybe 10, 20 years back it was. It is the FIs which is just running this show. So is there the truth? I mean, is it the fact that this is the real Sensex, or it is a real valuation, or like all, you know, the big one who talks about this is the real things, which is what we want to know about?
So the safeguard is extending the investment horizon, and you mentioned that people have burned their fingers for the simple reason that, I mean, you wait for a couple of years and at the fag end of the bull market, you start investing, and then probably you don't keep the discipline of regular investing. Otherwise, over a longer period, equities, and it's not only in India, I think globally, most of the other countries as well, have a long-term track record of delivering better inflation beating returns. You mentioned about, you know, some news yesterday and how it will impact the market. I think in India, because we keep watching the channels and we keep seeing these news. When I told you about the 15 years Sensex beating Berkshire Hathaway, in these 15 years we had Kargil War, we had 9/11, we had several governments changing, we had scams in 2000, we had several ups and downs in the world as well as in our economy and our politics. But over a period of time, markets have done well, companies have done well, we have produced great companies. In last meet, I mentioned one sentence and I am repeating it. India will produce an economic miracle which is unparalleled in the history of mankind. And I am not saying it that we'll do something like a 10.5% GDP growth like China for an extended period. But the big difference is that so in last probably more than 10 years, I think 12 years, we have delivered 7.5, maybe next year or 27, 8, whatever, pick your number. But I think the kind of institutions that we have built, the agreement that Suresh talked about between the RBI, the institutions that we have in India is such a great, vibrant democracy that we have. And I think that's one of the basic ingredients for entrepreneurship to flourish and for companies to do very well. And I think the government is moving in the right direction. And somebody mentioned about the land acquisition and whatever. And I keep saying, I mean, 2 years back when I was here, I think everybody thought that what will happen after the election. And I just said that at 4800, probably regardless of what happens in election, because democracy has its own self-correcting mechanism and macro has its own self-correcting mechanism. I think the vibrancy that we have in such a young country will always find some solution to these problems and will move ahead. We need to have that long-term faith and move away from the noise. I mean, that keep, you know, we hearing. I mentioned at the beginning when he asked, in the very near term, I also believe that the way valuations have risen, I think the market needs to have some time correction. Would have been better a little bit of price correction, but sheer liquidity flow from the rest of the world and still the demand for India is so high. I can't tell you the number of people who are visiting India in the last couple of days. I think all kinds of businessmen, all kinds of pension funds. You know, yesterday we met Suresh Prabhu and he said, I mean, in a group of investors that immediately I don't need your money, because the fact is that there are lots of people, the global pension funds who want to come and invest in India, and I'll take time to execute some of those things. So I think the sheer interest in the domestic investors, the liquidity will not allow the market to really correct. Otherwise, could have been a price correction, but I believe there could be some time correction, but take a longer term view and have faith.
Thank you. But there is always fund managers, they think of positive. Is there some way we have some advice to balance it out, like exiting at some place or some time and balance it out? Is that the need of the hour or something?
So not necessarily. I'm not giving a sales talk here that this is my NFO today that has come. I mean, on a more serious note, I mean, over a long period, I mean, equities have done well, and I have no reason to believe in India why. I mean, I think he showed one chart of the corporate profit growth over the last 20 years have grown at 14% CAGR. Why? I mean 14, I mean 1 or 2% plus or minus. If that grows, ultimately the stock market reflects that. For a sustained long-term bull market, you need a stable macro, which also requires a stable political environment. You need rising corporate profitability, you need entry-level valuations are right, and you need the liquidity flow. Now one can argue, I mean, you can't argue about the stable macro in India for next several years. You can't argue about whether the corporate profitability, maybe a 1 quarter here, 2 quarter there. I mean, but ultimately I think we will catch up with the long-term trend. You can't, valuation one can argue whether whatever, the historic 20 times or forward, whether it will be 15% earnings growth next year, then it becomes 18, otherwise it becomes 7, whatever number. So maybe, I mean, you made a couple of quarters of wait, but otherwise I think you put all these four together, gives me a confidence 5-10 years next couple of years, I think equities are likely to do well.
Well, on a
Thank you.
panel discussion
Thank you,
like
sir.
this, where you have multi-asset classes being discussed, if you take the starting point of Sensex, which is 1979-80, Sensex was at 100. Today Sensex is at 30,000, right? If you were so dumb that you just about made Sensex returns, i.e. you made no alpha, no active return, your money would be up 300 times. 2004, Sensex was at 3,000. Today we are at 30,000. So in the last 11 years, Sensex is up 10 times. This is assuming no extra return. Manish showed you how much his funds have outperformed over the last 11 years versus the index. Let's assume that there was no outperformance. Then you multiplied your money 10 times. And out of these 11 years, 5 years were lost under the leadership of UPA 2, when GDP growth halved, corporate earnings growth came down from 25% to 5% compounded for 5 years, right? Everything that could go wrong went wrong. And after that, you multiplied your money 10x. You multiplied your money 10x in 11 years, 300x in the last 30 years. This is by a wide margin compared to gold, compared to real estate, compared to bonds, compared to anything in the world, one of the best possible returns. But what investors remember is a crash of 500 points. People remember names like Harshad Mehta, Ketan Mehta, whatever, Parekh. People don't remember that money is already up 300 times, right? Compounded returns of Sensex during the course of 31 years is in excess of 15%. Post-tax 15%. Is there any other asset class where you made more than 15% post-taxes?
Excellent. This is
So this debate will continue till there is mankind. Those who align on the right side of asset classes will make a lot of money. Warren Buffett just finished a very long duration of investing, right? 50 years, and he published his annual letter, which is, I think, going viral. Everybody has a copy of it. He's a wise man. Coincidentally, he's the richest man as well. He's given his views on asset classes. Please read that, and I think you'll be clearer after that.
We always have some reasons not to buy equity. So sometimes we are worried about Portugal and Greece, sometimes about what US Fed is doing, sometimes whatever event here. On a lighter note, I tell you, in 2012, June 2012, my head of equity was in Spain, and those were the days markets were extremely volatile, because you remember those picks. Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece and Spain in those days. And every day market used to be like massively worried about what's going to happen in Euro, will Euro blow up? And he called me one day and he said, yaar, hum logon ko itna dar lagta hai wahan pe, yahan to everybody is playing football, everybody is drinking beer. So when you are in Spain, you don't feel that this country is like really going down, and every Indian is so worried about what's happening in Spain.
We come to the end of the panel discussion. Thank you, panelists, for this wonderful evening. I think we got several insights across asset classes. Thank you, Naveen, for taking us through this panel discussion. But before we conclude this, I wanted to give a token of our appreciation to all the panelists. So, Naveen, I request you to hand it over first to Navneet. Thank you, Navneet. Second panelist, Suyash. And Gautam. Unfortunately, our real estate panelist had a flight to catch, but we'll ensure that this reaches him. Yeah, thank you all, gentlemen. And it was a very, very interesting evening. Several insights, but we're all excited. I think the days ahead for India are especially colorful. And on this eve of Holi, we have some exciting savories for you. So, with this, I invite all of you to enjoy those savories. And, they are available, the experts are available through this evening in case you have any further questions. Thank you very much, and, have a good evening. Yeah.